Well, you'll find, first of all, absolutely no one gives any credence to Al Gore's claim that if the Greenland ice cap melts, we're going to get 20 feet of sea level rise in a couple of years or in a couple of decades. Nobody thinks that. And even this, if you look at this one here, as far as the sea level rise goes, even this study had to be retracted, and that only predicted 2.7 feet of sea level rise by the end of the 21st century, and even that had to be retracted. Okay, so we're not talking about flooding Manhattan and flooding Florida and flooding all of India. Okay, that's just, no one believes that. Where Al Gore got that information is really kind of beyond anybody. There isn't a scientist in the world who thinks that within the next couple of decades the sea level is going to rise by 20 feet. It just isn't going to happen. Those kind of changes don't happen from melting ice, as you'll find out with a little video clip I'm going to show you. They happen over a course of hundreds of thousands of years from the oceans expanding. And that does not happen even if you got a large increase in temperature. It doesn't happen that quickly. It takes a very long time for something as big as the ocean to expand. All right, so that's really kind of fiction. All right, that whole thing. All right, I think I've got a clip here next. Yeah. Actually, part of the same clip will be for the hurricanes and tornadoes too. I'll be able to find a little clip on both of them in here. You have that one on your paper or no? Yeah. You do? Okay, it's on the back side. All right. This is one that, again, has totally been backed away from, even in the popular news. Every scientist, even the ones who believe strongly in global warming and are advocates of it, and climate change, whatever you want to call it, will tell you that you can't blame storms or storminess on stronger storms or bigger storms, even like Al Gore tried to do, Hurricane Katrina and all that stuff. You can't do that. You can't blame hurricanes, tornadoes on that. And there's a couple of reasons why you can't, as you'll see in my little video clip in a second. One is it doesn't make sense from a theoretical standpoint that it would give you more storms. All right. And secondly, if you look at statistically what's happened as the Earth's gotten a little bit warmer, actually hurricane and tornado have decreased, if nothing else. So I say, well, why do we hear so much more about it? Why is there so much more damage done by these tornadoes and hurricanes? Why? Technology. Well, that's true. Well, exactly. One good reason. We have cell phones, and we have storm chasers, and we have people who can show this stuff to us as it's happening, and it makes the news, and we have 24-hour cable news. That's one reason. But there's another reason why hurricanes cause more damage today than they ever did, and tornadoes as well. What's that?
Because there's more things for it to damage.
Exactly. There's more people living in hurricane-prone areas. How many people over the last couple of decades have moved down towards Florida and filled up Florida? Well, Florida is like, nasty place to be for a hurricane because it's very low-lying lands. And, of course, the Gulf of Mexico with very warm water in the Atlantic, that's where the path, you can see it always comes up that way. So there were more people living in the path of hurricanes on the coast and stuff like that. And there was more technology to record it. So it seems like when we're in the summertime, we're watching the news, it seems like there's a tornado or a hurricane every day hitting. And we kind of think it must be due to global warming. It is not. Statistically, you would not see any increase. No one can show an increase statistically, or even claims it over as the Earth has warmed a little bit. No increase in the actual storminess, okay, or the strength of the storms, or the number of the storms. All right, I have a little clip I'll show you here. Hold on a second. Turn that light off for me.
Ignore the transmission, which is the water vapor involved.
Here we go.
By next Tuesday or something, they have to. Reporting has to get more and more hysterical because there are still, fortunately, a few hardened news editors around who will say, this is what you were saying 5 years ago. But now it's much, much worse. They're going to be 10 feet of sea level rise by next Tuesday or something. They have to keep on getting shriller and shriller and shriller.
It is now common in the media to lay the blame for every storm or hurricane on global warming. But is there any scientific basis for this?
This is purely propaganda. Every textbook in meteorology is telling you the main source of weather disturbances is the temperature difference between the tropics and the pole. And we're told in a warmer world, this difference will get less. Now that would tell you you'll have less storminess, you'll have less variability. But for some reason, that isn't considered catastrophic. So you're told the opposite.
News reports frequently argue that even a mild increase in global temperature could lead to a catastrophic melting of the polar ice caps. But what does Earth's climate history tell us?
We happen to have temperature records of Greenland.
We saw that clip before, right? That was on the melting of the ice caps, okay? So that was the one. I just want to show you that real quickly on that. Here's the, then skipping ahead a little bit to this part here. This is the floods, the sea level rise. I like that guy.
Alarming television programs raise the fearful prospect of vast tidal waves flooding Britain. But what causes the sea level to change, and how fast does it happen?
Sea level changes over the world in general are governed fundamentally by two factors. What we would call local factors, the relationship of the sea to the land, which often, by the way, is to do with the land rising or falling than anything to do with the sea. But if you're talking about what we call eustatic changes of sea, worldwide changes, that's through the thermal expansion of the oceans, nothing to do with melting ice. And that's an enormously slow and long process.
People say, oh, I see the ocean doing this last year. That means that something changed in the atmosphere last year. And this is not necessarily true at all. In fact, it's actually quite unlikely because it can take hundreds to thousands of years for the deep ocean to respond to forces and changes that are taking place at the surface.
It is also suggested that even a mild rise in temperature will lead to the spread northward of deadly insects.
I'm going to pick up that one in a second. That's going to be our next thing. All right, but you got that was just a quick little clip on both of those. Turn the light back on for a second. And here you see a graph. And really, tropical cyclone activity, hurricane activity is really lower now than it's been in a very long time. And again, no real correlation or relationship to the temperatures, to the temperature increase. Okay. Tropical diseases will spread. This is the next to last one I want to mention. It was not in the actual Al Gore video, clips that you saw, but it is absolutely a claim made by people, and that's what my next little clip's going to be about. And it's interesting about this one because once again, you've heard the stories. West Nile virus, right? You've heard of that, right? And we worry about. You ever heard? Really? We used to have a person that came in and talked to the classes even.
West Nile virus?
Yeah. The mosquito stuff, All right, well, no, I'm surprised. Well, anyway, you blame warmer weather on malaria and all these other tropical diseases are going to make their way north because it's going to be warmer up here. Something interesting about these supposed tropical diseases, they're not really tropical at all, as you'll see in the clip here. 1 second.
Specifically tropical. Most people were...
One more time. Here we go.
Mosquitoes are not specifically tropical. Most people will realize that in temperate regions there are mosquitoes. In fact, mosquitoes are extremely abundant in the Arctic. The most devastating epidemic of malaria was in the Soviet Union in the 1920s. There were something like 13 million cases a year and something like 600,000 deaths. A tremendous catastrophe that reached up to the Arctic Circle. Archangel had 30,000 cases and about 10,000 deaths. So it's not a tropical disease. Yet these people in the global warming fraternity invent the idea that malaria will move northwards.
Climate scare stories cannot be blamed solely on sloppy or biased journalism. According to Professor Reiter, hysterical alarms have been encouraged by the reports of the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC.
I want you to listen to what he says next. This is a guy, this is interesting, and he's not the only one who is technically on the IPCC. There are several I've seen interviews with who totally disagree with the conclusions of the IPCC, and yet they say stuff. Here's what they say. Whenever you hear someone talk about the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, They say, these are the top scientists in the world, and they're all agreed. And they all signed this document. Well, it's just not true. This guy was on the IPCC. This is a very interesting story. It's not alone.
On the spread of malaria, the IPCC warns us that
mosquito species that transmit malaria do not usually survive where the mean winter temperature drops below 16 to 18 degrees Celsius.
According to Professor Reiter, this is clearly untrue.
I was horrified to read the second and the third assessment reports because there was so much misinformation without any kind of recourse or virtually without mention of the scientific literature, the truly scientific literature, the literature by specialists in those fields.
In a letter to the Wall Street Journal, Professor Frederick Seitz, former president of America's National Academy of Sciences, revealed that IPCC officials had censored the comments of scientists. He said that
This report is not the version that was approved by the contributing scientists.
at least 15 key sections of the science chapter had been deleted. These included statements like,
None of the studies cited has shown clear evidence that we can attribute climate changes to increases in greenhouse gases. No study to date has positively attributed all or part of the observed climate changes to man-made causes.
Professor Seitz.
That's a big deal. You can't cherry pick. Again, you can't say, oh, well, this is what everybody believes, and only pick out the studies. And all these other people who wrote these other studies say, wait a minute, well, I contributed to that. This is my conclusion there. That's not what I think.
It's concluded.
I have never witnessed a more disturbing corruption of the peer review process than the events that led to this IPCC report.
In its reply, the IPCC did not deny making these deletions, but it said there was no dishonesty or bias in the report and that uncertainties about the cause of global warming had been included. The changes had been made, it said, in response to comments from governments, individual scientists, and non-governmental organizations.
When I resigned from the IPCC, I thought that was the end of it. But when I saw the final draft, my name was still there, so I asked for it to be removed. Well, they told me that I had contributed, so it would remain there. So I said, no, I haven't contributed because they haven't listened to anything I've said. So in the end, it was quite a battle. But finally, I threatened legal action against them, and they removed my name. And I think this happens a great deal. Those people who are specialists but don't agree with the polemic and resign, and there have been a number that I know of, they are simply put on the author list and become part of this 2,500 of the world's top scientists.
Yeah, I mean, that's just not right. That's not fair. It's not, it's basically dishonest. Turn the light back on, please. Thanks. All right, so back to the actual specific thing we were talking about before. That's the last video clip I think you're going to see. Tropical diseases will spread. Well, in reality, malaria and a lot of these other things are not tropical diseases. And in fact, what makes a difference isn't your climate as much as it is your wealth. And I want to go off on a little bit of a tangent here, too. Okay? Make a little bit of a claim here. It's easy to be a rich, white environmentalist in America. You know? We don't have to worry. We're not living in squalor. We're not living in Africa. We're not living in India. We're not burning cow dung to stay alive and stay warm in the winter. We're not barely surviving on what crops we can grow. It's very easy to be an environmentalist here. It's very easy to say that, you know what? Burning coal is bad. Burning oil is bad. You know, don't do it. You guys over there who are barely surviving and living in little huts, you're not allowed to make a coal-fired plant so you can have electricity. You're not allowed to do that. All right? Yeah, that's how we got rich for 100 years. We did that. But you can't. You guys don't do that because now we know it's bad for the planet. And if you do it, we're going to hurt the planet even more. Well, you know what? If I'm living in those other countries, which is exactly what China and India are doing, they're saying, screw you. I'm doing what I want to do. I ain't listening to you. And if we cut back on all this stuff that we're talking about cutting back on in America, it wouldn't hurt us too much. We have our cell phones. We have our computers. We have our standard of living, which may drop a little bit, you know, if we did some of these things. But over there, it's a matter of survival. It's a matter of survival for these people. And why would that make a difference? Well, because the more money you have, the better you are at, you know, treating really any kind of environmental problems you have and health problems. Remember just a couple of days ago, or a couple of weeks ago, there was that missionary. 2 of them came back with Ebola. Did you hear about that in the news? They shipped them back because they were in, I don't know, Africa. I think they were in Africa. And they shipped them back because they contracted Ebola trying to help the natives. Well, in Africa, your mortality rate from the Ebola virus is like 90%. They ship these 2 people back and they're both alive. They're both going to make it. They're both fine. If Ebola were to have an outbreak in America, it'd be a bad thing. But would the death rate be 90% here? No, because we have way better medical care. And we also know how to contain things. You know, in Africa and in lesser developed countries with fewer resources, they can't do that. All right? Wealth is the best way to take care of a country. All right? And if you're saying you can't have what we have, and guess what you're saying to them? If you say, oh, don't build this dam, that would be bad for this fish. And don't burn coal, even though you're sitting on a bunch of coal. And don't drill for oil, because that's bad for the environment too. Just keep, we'll give you some, solar panels, and that'll keep you going. This is a large population of people living in squalor. They're going to do what they have to do to survive. I hate to tell you, I would do the same thing. I think you would too. All right? And the more wealthy that country becomes, the cleaner it becomes. It is an amazing thing. The wealthier a country becomes, like, what was it? My son went to Haiti on a trip, a mission trip. And basically, I remember seeing satellite photographs. I think there's Haiti. What's it next to? The Dominican Republic or something like that, right? And you can see the border because Haiti's very, very poor. And the other country, the Dominican Republic, is not. And there's all kinds of rainforests in the wealthy country. And it's like a desert in Haiti. Why? Because they're poor. What do they do with their desert? What do they do with their rainforests? They cut them down. They cut them down for money, to survive. A richer country wouldn't have to do that. You can be an environmentalist if you're in a rich country. So the best way to handle a lot of these problems isn't by, we're going to keep the temperature from rising 0.5 degree so we don't get more mosquitoes here for more malaria. No. We got rid of malaria because we got DDT. We spread DDT around like it was cotton candy in the 50s and 60s. And it was only in the 70s when we stopped doing that we eradicated malaria from America. And then we told other countries, don't do that. And millions of people in those other countries died because we stopped spraying DDT in those other countries. All right? So it seems like your solution is, you always have a solution. You always have some kind of an idea. And this is going to be our problem. We're going to solve it by doing this. But there are unintended consequences. Just stick with this before I finish up this one. I just want to say a little thing here. Again, the climate in North America is entirely conducive to malaria and all those tropical diseases. Okay? So that, even if we did warm up a little bit, it's not going to mean there's going to be more malaria. There's going to be more tropical diseases. But look at this. This is an interesting little stat right here. If you take a look here. Even in this day and age, in 1995, there was a dengue fever outbreak in Mexico. 2,361 confirmed cases. How many occurred in Texas, which is right next to Mexico? Should be, there's a lot of inter-travel between there. Only 86 cases in the United States. Again, why? Better health care, better hygiene, richer country, we generally do better with disease. It's the best way to protect against a disease isn't to try to control the climate. It's try to make people richer and give them better health care and better, that's the way to do it. Okay? All right, last one here, of course, is the polar bears. He just wanted his Coke. He was going for that that iceberg. There was a Coke there, and he wanted it, and it broke. Remember that? How sad that was when he was going after that? Okay. Well, I bet you'd be surprised to find out that the population of the polar bears, you don't have the paper? Okay, I'll give it to you. Population of the polar bears has gone up, not down, recently. Ow. Oh my God. You gotta stop moving that back. Yeah. It's too loud. It hurt crack. Is that your back that cracked?
Until we do, my back here hurts.
All right. So if you take a look. It's pretty interesting that, first of all, let me just say something. Polar bears can swim. They're very good swimmers. So they're not going to get stranded on some iceberg and die. Secondly, the statistics do not bear this out. And it's a funny thing. I remember, this was probably about 5 years ago, I remember reading that the EPA or whoever does this, the government, the U.S. government, was considering, I don't know if they ever did it, of increasing the level of threat, in other words, to go to endangered species for polar bears. When all of the statistics up to that point have shown that the polar bear population has increased. When have you ever heard of making a species more endangered when there are more of them being shown by every study? It doesn't make any sense. But that's what we do when politics is in it and not science. All right? It's not about science, it's about politics when you do stuff like that. So, and by the way, there's another reason they show polar bears. For the same reason you saw that little video clip in the Al Gore movie. They're cute, they're cuddly, kids love them, and it's a great emotional ploy to get people to feel, like climate change is a big deal, and I've got to do something about it. Emotion, not science. All right, that's what they're preying on. Okay. All right. Well, that was the last one. I want to show you something now, and I've got some of these things on it, but I want you to look up here. This, to kind of summarize a couple of things, I'm going to start with this. When I was a kid sitting where you guys are, this is what I read every day. In the newspapers, in the magazines, in my weekly reader in elementary school. No kidding. I can actually remember this. Everyone was predicting the next ice age in the 70s. Everybody was. That's when I went to elementary school. Okay? That's when I was in middle school, elementary school. Let's read some of these quotes. I want you, these are actual quotes. You can look them up for yourself. Science Magazine. These are all right there on your thing if you want to read them. Warned of extensive, this is 1976, extensive northern hemisphere glaciation. Science Digest reported that the world's climatologists are agreed. Does that sound familiar? Everyone's agreed that we must prepare for the next ice age. The climatologists were agreed back then. 40 years ago, everyone was sure we're heading into the next ice age. The Christian Science Monitor. Earth's climate is changing faster than even experts expect. Reported that glaciers have begun to advance. Al Gore's telling us glaciers are receding. And he's right. Some glaciers are receding. But back in the 70s, for the previous 25 years, glaciers were advancing. And it was getting much colder globally. Growing seasons in England and Scandinavia are getting shorter. The North Atlantic is cooling down about as fast as an ocean can cool. Newsweek said, meteorologists are almost unanimous. Again, have we heard that before? Unanimous. That catastrophic famines might result from the global cooling that the New York Times, you've heard of the New York Times, in 1975 said, may mark the return to another ice age. Here's another one from the Times. Also said, a major cooling of the climate is widely considered inevitable. Inevitable. It's going to happen. Just like global warming is inevitable. Just like global warming is unanimous. It's pretty amazing. Let's look at some other quotes here. First Earth Day, which we still celebrate today, Earth Day. It's pretty amazing. Still hear about that. University of California's Kenneth Watts said, if present trends continue, the world will be about 4 degrees colder in 1990. And 11 degrees colder by the year 2000. People, you were born around the year 2000. It was not 11 degrees colder. And in fact, we all know what happened. It actually got much warmer after the 70s. Okay? Not much, not a half a degree. I mean, if you call that a lot, maybe a half a degree to a degree warmer. To predict, this just shows you the arrogance and the hubris of scientists and of humans in general. To predict an 11-degree rise in 20 years, it's from 70 in 30 years, is unbelievable. I mean, to believe that scientists could ever have been that stupid, to me, it is equivalent to calling the Earth flat today. All right, people who say the temperature is going to be 11 degrees hotter in 30 years are saying the Earth is flat. That's a real flat earther. Instead, they're calling all of the global warming skeptics flat earthers. They're the ones who don't believe the science. When in fact, they're making ridiculous claims that would have been unprecedented to see something like that. No one in their right mind would say something like this, and yet scientists were saying it. They were all agreed in saying it. Pretty amazing stuff. Pretty amazing stuff. Now, I wanted to show you this chart here, too. Again, this is not on your paper. I'm going to summarize it in a minute. I have a little summary in the back there. But I want to show you this chart first. Remember I told you, I love this chart. I found this on Wikipedia, of course, when I was looking up stuff. Because before I even show you the chart, let me show you something else. You know, a long time ago, well, there's a guy called Malthus, 100 years ago or so, who believed there were only a finite number of resources on the planet, and as the population of humans increased, there was going to be widespread famines. We needed to control populations, okay, because we have to have we're going to run out of resources. And that was completely echoed by a guy called Paul Ehrlich in a book called The Population Bomb. I remember I was in Colorado and taking my first education class at the university, and I was in this class with a guy who actually worked on the BSCS curriculum, biology curriculum, that was going to be used in all high schools. BSCS. I actually had a BSCS book when I was in high school, so I remember this. And he worked on it. I believe he worked with Paul Ehrlich because he worked on a movie. Apparently, he was involved in it. He was a professor who was involved in making this movie called The Population Bomb. And their prediction was, I mean, it's a very simple prediction. If you look, I'm not going to, these aren't actual graphs, but basically the logic was this. If you look at population, let's call population in red, okay, over the course of, until 1970, let's just say. And then they predicted ahead of what it's going to be. And if you looked at food production, okay, and maybe that looked like this in 1970, about right there maybe. Okay, that was food. So this is food, and this is people. Okay, simple as that. Now, I'm just making this up, but basically you understand what I'm doing. What did they do? Well, they looked ahead. They said, well, look, if we predict into the future, and we predict into the future somewhere around here, let's call it 1990, we're going to have widespread famines. And that's what they predicted. Because there'll be too many people and not enough food. Food production, they extrapolated into the future. And population growth, they extrapolated into the future. And then they said, look, in 20 years, this is what's going to happen. All right? Predicted widespread famines. You should see some of the quotes. I mean, they're scary kind of quotes that they were saying back then. Okay? Of course, it didn't happen. And it didn't happen because any time you predict into the future a graph like this, you're making an absolute and utter guess. There is no way you can tell what's going to happen in the future. Of course, what has happened to our food production? It's gone way up. What's happened to our population? It's continued to grow, but not as exponentially as they originally thought. So it turns out that here we are in 2014, and we have not reached this point where we have way more people than we could possibly feed. You might say to yourself, well, there are famines, not global famines. There are localized famines caused most of the time, if not all the time, by either war, strife within the country, political differences, that kind of stuff, not caused by a lack of food. There's plenty of food to feed everybody on the planet right now, which they would have never predicted. I think, what's his name, Ehrlich said there's no way that India could ever feed 200,000 people. Now have over a million or whatever, or a billion, or 200 million, or over a billion. I forget what the number is, 100,000 million. And now they have over, it was completely wrong about these predictions. So I want to go back to this graph here. Oh, that's the one. This is my favorite graph. When I was looking around at all these things, I love this one. This is, honest to God, the actual graph you'll find on Wikipedia when you're talking about population growth. Type in population growth into a Google search, you'll find this graph. It's absolutely worthless. Look at the graph. I want you to see what this is doing. This green one is the UN predicted low. Prediction of the population growth on the low side. The orange one is the medium, and the red one is the high. Remember how I told you a theory that explains everything or predicts anything actually predicts nothing. It actually explains nothing. This is what this theory is telling me. It's telling me that by 2100, the population of the world could have doubled or it could have shrunk. What does that tell me? It's a useless piece of information. A 2-year-old could draw a more useful graph than this. Because all it's saying is, The population may go down, it may stay about the same, or it may go up. What? What's the point of that graph? I mean, it's useless when you play with statistics and you try to pretend that they mean something. When people tell you they know what the CO2 concentration is going to be in 2100, they know what the temperature is going to be in they know what the sea level is going to be in 2100. That's what they're telling you. Useless information. They have no clue. They have no idea. And it's been proven wrong so many times, it's amazing we still fall for it. But we do. We still fall for it. Please tell me how that graph is useful to anyone. It's saying, here's what our population could be, or there, or there. Absolutely no idea. It's ridiculous. Anyway, last thing also about statistics, I'm going to give you a couple of graphs, a couple of papers here, okay? I think Michael Crichton's probably one of my heroes. I've read most of his books, if not all of them. And I got a little summary of what he says about global warming, okay? And it's got some of the other stuff I've already shown you on here. And I've got also, from Michael Crichton, some of his take on some of the statistics, the graphs. I want to show you some of these graphs. Because you do get a lot, you know what, when you're watching the news from now on, which you don't do very often, I know you're kids. But when you do see it, you're going to say, well, he said the exact opposite. How could they both be true? It's not obvious to the untrained eye. It's not obvious where the fault lies or where the problem lies when there seems to be two opposite things being said. Right? Most of the time, it's hidden by statistics. Okay? Like, take this graph. This is a very common graph, and it's correct. But so is this. They both show the same thing. Look at this again. That graph is that graph. It's just the scale has changed. Which one looks scary? That one doesn't look too scary. That one does. Right? Here, oh my God, we're up here. We're going one way. We've doubled. Look at temperature's doubled in the last 10 or 20 to 100 years. Has temperature doubled in the last 100 years? No. That's what it looks like. If you were to, you just graph it a different way, and that's what it looks like. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? Now, the same exact information graphed two different ways. And I also wanted, while I still have you here, I wanted to show you a couple of other things here. This is where I want to go off on something you'll see a lot more in chem after AP stuff is over, after I do the AP exam review. I'm going to have multiple topics where we're going to investigate individually and in detail. And as those topics come up, you're going to see two concepts come up all the time. The first one I call the precautionary principle. Most of you are probably saying, well, what's the harm? You know, better safe than sorry. Let's just cut out all fossil fuel burning because we might be harming the planet. Better to be safe than sorry. That seems like a logical, conclusion. But there's a problem with that. It's called the precautionary principle, but there are unintended consequences. That's the second part of the precautionary principle, the unintended consequences. Back in the 70s, I told you about DDT a little bit, just quickly. Let me say a few more words about that, because that's one of the things we'll be investigating. Back in the 70s, they found out, Rachel Carson wrote a book called Silent Spring, and they found out, you'll have to read that in college. I've gone to college bookstores, and it's still, I bet you there's not a liberal college in the world that doesn't have that as required reading for certain classes, mostly environmental, but even probably sociology classes and other ones, and science classes, environmental, The book made the claim, she was a journalist, she made the claim that DDT and other pesticides, but especially DDT, was causing the eggshells of raptors like the California condor and bald eagles and hawks and things like that. They're causing these eggshells to thin, and therefore the population of these eagles and condors were dropping. And so it was all being caused by DDT. And there was good evidence to show that that was the case, that DDT does do this. So we stopped using DDT. And what was the result? 30 million people died. We saved some eggs. We saved some birds. And how did 30 million people die? How did they die? Well, because in the third world, where DDT was controlling malaria just exploded. All right? So there are unintended consequences to the precautionary principle. Maybe we are hurting the bald eagles. Maybe we are hurting we should just stop using DDT entirely. You got to figure there was a reason we used DDT. We used it in our country extensively to wipe out malaria. There used to be malaria in this country. All right? We use it extensively to wipe it out. And then once it's wiped out of America, we tell other countries, don't use that, it's bad. And we're doing the exact same thing again with fossil fuels. It would be nice if there was a nice, clean alternative. And by the way, we're already heading towards that. That's what this graph behind me is about. It'd be nice if there was a nice, clean alternative and we could all just, burn water for energy, and get nothing as a pollutant. But it doesn't exist. And you all like your cell phones, and you all like your cars and be able to drive to school every day. You do like that. You want to give that up? I don't think so. But you want other people who are living in huts to give up staying warm in the winter so that they don't burn those same fossil fuels that you got rich on. See, I didn't get rich. I'm only 15, 16, 17 years old. Your parents did, your grandparents did, and your great-grandparents did. That's what America was built on. It was built on fossil fuels. It was built on coal. It was built on the steel industry and oil industry. It was built on that. We got rich from that. And now we're telling other countries they can't do it. But my point is, and by the way, Emily, had a question about that or no?
Not really.
Okay, well, my point is, I'm coming back to this. I believe in being environmentally sound. I really do. I do more for the environment than I'll bet most of you do. I drive, more fuel-efficient cars. I compost all my yard waste. I don't throw anything in the garbage. Everything's composted in my own compost pile. I'm not taking it down to the test track, but just in my own pile. I have a garden. I'm very fuel-efficient. I have a fuel-efficient house, fuel-efficient cars. But we're already heading there. That's the whole point. Take a look. We used to burn coal, mostly. That was our big source of electricity. We went towards oil. Oil has less carbon in it than coal does. Natural gas has considerably less than that. Here's a better way to look at it. Over time, what has happened to our usage of these materials? We're using less and less coal. Coal has, let's assume the blue molecules are carbon atoms, and the hydrogen ones, this isn't exactly what a coal looks like, but you know what I'm saying. There's way more blue carbon than there is H's. H's are good. I burn, hydrogen, I get water. No biggie, right? No problem. But if I burn carbon, I get carbon dioxide. So if there is a problem with that, certainly it's more of a pollutant. Well, look, from coal we went to oil. Oil has more of these little red hydrogens on it. So when I burn it, I get more water, less carbon dioxide. Take a look at methane. Percentage-wise, way better. Way better to use methane. Okay? 4 H's for every 1 carbon. Over here, all right? And over there, way more carbon. So I'm already moving to that area. But there are fuel cells that use hydrogen. They tried to make cars like that. Nobody seemed to buy them. All right? Everybody wants the Priuses, like those hybrids. Because they have, I don't know why. It's dangerous. They're scared of hydrogen. We are already going this way. We're going towards that way. By the way, where are we getting all the methane from nowadays? Where are we getting the natural gas from? Something else that the environmentalists hate. What is it? Fracking. Yeah, fracking. Everybody hears about fracking. Now we're going to talk about that. We're going to do a whole thing on it. All right, we'll do a whole thing on fracking. You can't please everybody, people. We're using way less carbon dioxide, producing way less carbon dioxide by using natural gas than you are by burning coal or oil. But they're against that too. All they want is wind and solar. Well, you cannot power your lifestyle on wind and solar alone. Does not happen. Cannot happen. So you either have to decide you want to give up a lot, or what time is this open? 1 minute? Okay. Last and fourth, I just summarized. You already have this on there. Take a look real quickly. The questions I will give you on the test. If y'all look here, quick, don't pack up. Listen. Questions I'll give you on the test are going to come from what I've just done for the past 3 days. Okay? I might ask you to give me, and you need to explain. These aren't going to be just 5-point questions. These are going to be essay questions. You're going to have to give me lots of specifics under why, perhaps, the CO2 driving temperature change, at least when I show you a graph, what's that showing me? Why is it not quite as scary as you might think? And all these other things, you need to look through them all. You have the notes for it, and I'm going to pass these out before you leave.